Good morning. Happy Friday, everybody. We are so happy to be here with you. I am your host, Catherine McCord, typically the host of Career Launch Live and Supermania. Today, I will be supporting Prioritize Equality. Look at the top corner over there. That is a website that I've built to give a lot of resources to support the idea of gender equality in the Constitution. And we're going to be talking today about Roe v. Wade reversal and how small businesses can and should be handling it. And I have a wonderful guest with me. I'm going to let her introduce herself. Take it away, Miss Antisha.
Hi, thank you, Catherine. So I'm Antisha Wiley. I go by Tisha. You probably see my name there at the bottom. I have been in the human resources, human capital management, people operations, whatever it's called, you call it, space for about 12 years now. I started initially in municipal government, moved on to state government. And now I currently am the president and owner of Make the Change LLC, which is a human resources consultancy based out of Texas, but we support those who have human resources needs, all over. So that's a little bit about me. I am an Air Force veteran. However, my HR experience may have started there, but not under that title. I was a meteorologist. So a little fun fact. But
That's cool.
But I'm definitely happy to be here and to talk a little bit about what we should and could be doing, because I too own and operate a small business.
And me too. It's really great that we get to come together. And I loved all the comments you dropped in the episode that I did a few days ago. That was so great. So small businesses do have very unique situations, right? And even different laws in some cases. So it is a very different concept than these big companies like Dick's Sporting Goods that have come out with a very strong stance. And I want to be clear that we're going to be giving advice here for how you should handle it in general. So we're not saying everyone should have a policy that says we're going to, offer accommodations for, the abortion reversal. That's not what we're doing here today. We're going to be talking about all the things that you can do to address it. So starting off, what are some of the first things that you want to say to small business owners who are sitting there going, what do I do with this?
So the very first thing I want to say is just don't panic because
Breathe.
You are not alone. Right. You are not alone. There are tons of us out there who are in the same situation, but also like Catherine and myself, there's help. I know small businesses don't necessarily have employment law attorneys because some of them don't even have real HR departments. And that's okay. There are a lot of people, and if you watched the podcast on yesterday, there are a lot of people who are here, to try to provide you with help and support. So again, don't panic. There are resources there. We're going to be giving you some absolutely free tips today on some things you probably haven't thought about that you maybe should, and some things that I'm sure you're already thinking about as well.
And I want to second that. So don't panic. It's okay. And I also want to remind everybody that it's not about your personal feelings about the Roe v. Wade reversal. When you own a company, when you're in leadership, when you're in HR, it's about taking care of your people. Okay. So that's always the hat that you have to have on when you go into this. And it can be hard to put your personal feelings aside. And I know from personal experience, it can be very hard because you have very strong feelings one way, but this person needs support this other way. So I just want to acknowledge that it could be very tough, but it is something that you absolutely must do. So Tisha, good morning, and good morning to Pam. She's saying good morning to us. So first of all, I know that you had a lot that you want to talk about. So what's one of the first things that you want to dive into on this topic?
So one of the first things is just being aware, if you're not already aware, of what the Roe versus Wade reversal actually did. So right. A lot of people are saying, oh, it took away women's, rights to abortion. No, it just made it more complicated, much more complicated. And so there are states that are still allowed to perform abortions. And so one of the things that, we really want to clarify here is that, again, like Catherine said, we're not trying to say you should choose a side. What we are trying to say, and what we want you to get through this communication, is that regardless of what that side is, there are some things that you should do to be supportive to everybody involved. Okay.
Right.
And so that's where we are. That's where we are. So one of the first things, again, is just understanding that, there is still the ability for women to go and to have abortions. it's much more complicated because they're having to travel. Some of them will have to, or a lot of them will have to go and travel longer distances, take off more time, spend more money, which is not only costly for that individual, but it's also costly for small businesses, because small businesses
Yes.
already have limited resources in terms of funds and being able to support and provide help for and assistance to these individuals. But also, if you have a limited staff and you're having staff having to take off more time,
Right.
that overburdens the business and those other individuals who are still there. So it's a multifold issue and disadvantage that is very important to discuss.
And I'm so glad that you showed the sympathy for the small business on that, because I have it too. Like it's, it's so hard. It's just like whenever women go out on maternity leave, which you absolutely should. I just want to put that out there. You absolutely should do that. It's your right and it's important. But it is very hard on a small business to have somebody gone for weeks at a time. So this is no different. And now, granted, it's a much shorter time, hopefully, but it is still a lot harder on a small business that has to have somebody out for several days versus maybe one day. So let's talk about that a little bit. So the first thing that you have to address is the practicality of everything. What can you support? What can you offer? Should you offer anything? So let's just I want to kind of start by walking through that aspect of it. So I'm going to start with your thoughts. What are some of the things that you think the small businesses should be starting with as they make policies?
So one of the very first things is to try to have not just a unified front. Sometimes saying a unified front means that, well, people don't really support, but we're going to pretend, right? But what I mean by that is getting anyone who's a part of your leadership team into a conversation so that you all can agree on how you move forward. Because if there's dissension amongst your leadership team, there's going to be dissension throughout your organization. Now, if you're
Right.
the only person who is a leader, in your organization, then maybe you want to, talk to someone externally, a professional externally. So those employment law attorneys, the other, HR, partners and professionals to help provide you with some guidance. But that's the very first thing you should do, because you shouldn't try to start writing and implementing policies without clear strategic direction from those who really have a say so in how your company moves forward.
Absolutely. That's very, very true. I think that, and it can be hard because there's going to be personal feelings, but you have to remind them it's not about you. We're talking about supporting the team. So this is what we're getting on board with. It doesn't matter what your personal take is. So one thing too, I've had people ask me is, well, I don't believe in abortion and I don't want to have a policy about it. Do I really have to address this? Yes. Let me just put that out there. Either way that you go, whether you offer support or not, you do need to address it. If you have anything more than like 5 people in your company, you need to address this. Okay. I work with a lot of companies that are size like 20 people to about 300. And guys, you need to be or folks, I should say, you need to be addressing this. It's very important because either way, they need to know that you're acknowledging what's happening. And there's stress on both sides. There's stress for people who are scared by all this, and there's stress for people that are happy because people are telling them that they're wrong. And so they're very stressed out about it. So address it. I think one of the first things to discuss is general employee care and wellness, just for everybody. So this might be a great time to use an EAP. And I'm going to let Tisha explain to you what that is.
So an EAP is an employee assistance program or an employee assistance plan, right? It's called different things, different places. But essentially what it does, it provides a free benefit to employees for services like counseling. There's also some performance management aspects to some of them as well. So you can kind of dive into that as well, or delve into that a little bit as well. But essentially it's something that the company offers to employees so that they don't really have to come to the company or don't have the need if there's some confidentiality issues or concerns. They don't have to come to people within their company to basically tell their business, right? To share what they're going through, their thoughts and their feelings, and to get that support. And so, I spoke about this or not spoke about it, but I dropped it in the comments yesterday in that podcast.
Yes, you did.
And to let everyone know, like, they're relatively inexpensive. Some of them are, I did some research last night, some of them are as little as 75 cents. I said $1 in the comments, but 75 cents per person per month. So for a
Yes.
small business, even if you have, 5 people, you're talking about basically about $5 $5 per month. And so that's something that's relatively inexpensive. I will tell you, because people will ask, well, a lot of times HR will recommend things and they don't use it. I've never worked for a company who had an EAP plan and I didn't use it. That's just
Yeah, it gets
um,
used. It does.
they
That's
get used. And when you look at the studies on the use of EAPs, it's lower than what you would think. But then if you think on a global scale, how many people actually go out and seek counseling, it's very comparative, right?
right.
It's very
Right.
comparable, I should say. And so
Yes.
EAPs, first and foremost, one of the things that you definitely should be talking about. And I did want to say too, Catherine, in addition to the leadership, so I always like to lead with leadership because we're supposed to be the first to start thinking and talking about these things. But it's really important too in those discussions to make sure you're talking to your employees, to ask them how they feel, not necessarily their opinions, but what do they think will be something that could be supportive, for them, supportive for others. Give them an
Right.
opportunity to share, because it doesn't make sense for you to try to create these policies for your company and you're not even asking the people within your company
Right.
what they want, right? So
Yes. We saw a lot of that starting in 2020, where people just started making these arbitrary policies and were like, why did you do that? That helped literally nobody. So so she's absolutely right. I'm going to second that. You need to ask your team, and again, not their personal opinions, to be very clear about that. I'm not asking your personal opinions. I'm asking you, are there any benefits that could help you out right now? You can even send out an anonymous survey so that people can feel more comfortable. That's something I would strongly suggest, because people can get very awkward about this kind of thing and feel funny about speaking up. But if it's anonymous, then they're more likely to be honest with you. So, I've also had a lot of people ask me, and I want to get your opinion on this, because I know what I've told them. So they've said, well, what about the guys that are saying this isn't fair that they get this benefit and I don't have a benefit for me? So definitely have something to say with this. Like, you're like excited about this question.
yes.
All right. So,
So
oops,
being
I just
that
kicked my
I
camera.
am very, very supportive, and I don't know if it was my connection or yours. I lost you for a second there, the audio. But being that I am very supportive of, can you hear me?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
That was me. I kicked my camera.
Oh, okay.
I karate'd it.
I'm mad about this. So being that I am very supportive about, equality for everyone, one of the things that I mentioned too, in one of the conversations was, this shouldn't be something that's provided only to the actual individual. So I don't know, Catherine, if you remember, one of the things I mentioned was the individual, family members, spouses, whomever is going to be supporting this individual. Some places actually, some clinics actually require that someone
Yes.
drives the person home. And so whether that's male, female, it really doesn't matter. So the benefit shouldn't just be written. Your policy shouldn't just be written necessarily for women. Yes,
Right.
I am a huge proponent for, women's rights. And I know this affects, women more so than anyone, because it's their bodies and our bodies. However, there shouldn't be an exclusion. You shouldn't have a
Right.
policy that says men can't, use this benefit. Now, the caveat for those men who say, well, we need some vasectomy options, and things like that. We're talking about two completely different things here. Not to say that
You saw my face drop. No.
Yeah. I saw a comment on LinkedIn actually yesterday that someone mentioned. It's amazing, some of the comments.
Well, like, look here, you could go down the street and get a vasectomy, so that doesn't require travel.
Right,
so you're fine.
Right. So for those, I have very little sympathy when it comes to, you needing something additional. But this is for those women who don't have the option to be able to get the services that they need locally.
Right. So this isn't even for every state. I mean, that's something to keep in mind. There are states where this isn't really going to come up. But for a lot of companies that have a lot of remote workers, you need to think about where they live, not just where you're located, but where they live. And trust me, I get it. I have team members even outside of the country. So I completely understand that can make it a little bit more complicated. And I do want to hit on something here that I think is very important about what you brought up. So the caregiver aspect. And so the way that I've been writing out these policies that are being reviewed by a lawyer today. They will be available for anybody that wants them. For their companies, please reach out to me. Here to support. We want to support you. There's a free version, and then there's upgrades from that as well. So we are having policies written up. And one of the versions, the one that I am most recommending, is that it is a general policy for anyone who needs to travel. In other words, it's absolutely not available due to, legal restrictions or whatever in your area. For anyone who needs to travel, here you go. Because what if there is some weird, law or regulation about somebody's surgery that they want and that they need to go have somewhere else? Great, you can support them too, but also for the caregivers. And I did specifically write that in because, and for, husbands. So let's say it's a D&C for a miscarriage, or let's say which some states are actually making that complicated, believe it or not. Florida being one of them, go Florida. God, or if there's, something else medical happening, or just anything or what if the, partner just wants to go, or whomever they are just wants to go support. Partners need to be able to go support. Family may want to be there, but it needs to be for the caregivers and the person receiving the procedure. If you're going to write a policy, that's only right. Absolutely. So I just wanted to kind of second that.
Oh, absolutely. I
agree. So then you have what if somebody doesn't want to process that because it's against their religion or their beliefs, which is valid. Okay. I want to put that out there. I am not saying that these people, I want to make it very clear that I'm not saying these people are wrong or anything like that. If it is against your beliefs, it is against your beliefs, and you shouldn't have anything imposed on you either. But then you also can't impose on other humans. So that's just how our law works. So let's talk about how you handle that. How do you handle when somebody in your company, even in HR, says, I'm not going to process requests for reimbursements? How do you handle that?
So there's a couple of things that this actually brings up, a couple of laws, or acts, I should say. So the Pregnancy Discrimination Act is one. There's also the Americans with Disabilities Act. And then there's Title VII, Civil Rights Act of 1964, which prohibits discrimination based on a protected class, right? And right. So in drafting any policies and having any discussions surrounding the Roe v. Wade reversal, you should be thinking of, at very minimum, those three things, those three laws. And that should help guide you in how to structure and how to write your policy. So going back to the question, how do you handle it if a person says, well, this is against my religious, beliefs. I don't agree with this. This is against my moral values. How do you handle that? So there's a couple of different ways. And of course, like, we're not employment law attorneys, so always consult your employment law attorney. But but one of the things that I do recommend, what's that? I can't hear you.
Oh, there we go. I was going to say, sorry. I was going to say, go talk to Mary or Ashley. They were on my shows the other day. Go talk to them. They can answer the legal questions for you.
Absolutely. But so how do you handle it currently, right? So there shouldn't be too much of a deviation from how you handle those situations currently, because if you do start to deviate and start to treat people differently, then you're opening yourself up to some claims, some EEOC claims. You're treating me differently because of my religious belief. So you have to be really careful about that. If you're currently not having these issues, then that's why it's really important to get an understanding, to talk to some HR professionals or employment law ELAs, so that they can guide you in, what to do. Because the worst thing that you would want to do is try to force somebody to do something that is right. truly against their, religious belief or their personal values, who are working for your company, because you should be valuing your employees and what they bring to the table. That's why they're there, right?
Right. Okay. And I want 100%. Yes. Oh my God. Right. Yes.
So I'm an employee advocate. So first things first, I want to put that out there. But yeah, so you should be having those conversations to make sure that you are trying. Sometimes it's about compromising, right? Sometimes we get so caught up, even as leaders, as managers, saying, this is our policy and you have to do this. Now, you don't want, to set an example that, people can pick and choose what they do, within your organization. But you also do want to set the tone and say that, hey, this is a very unique situation, in that this is a change. Right. People have been going along for a while, 50 years now, without this being something to consider. Just like when COVID came, COVID.
Right. It was like,
new. You don't want to make some of the mistakes that we made in COVID. But yes, you definitely should treat them the same way as you would any other time this situation has come up, but then sit down and have a conversation and see what you can do. The part with small businesses that's different, though, I have to mention, since we are talking about small businesses,
there's not a lot of options.
You don't have a lot of options. You
have one HR person if you're lucky.
Right.
if you're lucky.
Right. So it's really important to have those conversations on the front end. Don't wait until something comes up. I'm very proactive. I don't like to be reactive. That's a great
Yes.
thing in most situations, but sometimes for working for people who are more reactive is not. That's why I started my own
But you
company.
have to be proactive with stuff like
You
this. You
have to
have
be
to get
proactive.
ahead of it. You do. There's no option.
Absolutely.
So have the conversations with your people. Find out now if it's something that they're comfortable with. And they don't need to explain why. I want to put that out there too. You don't need to say, well, why aren't you comfortable with it? Nope. All you need to know is yes or no. Are you comfortable with this? And if no, then you need to find someone who is, who can be trained to be familiar with the laws and the regulations, and who can handle the policy. And I want to go ahead and take this time to mention one, if you're small, one person should be the contact for this. And that is it. And they need to have special training. You can hire someone to train them. They can do an online training, but they need to have special training for this on how to handle this issue. I would say that you definitely, we have some good comments here. I would say that you definitely need to keep the privacy at the front. And for little companies, that's going to be harder because it is people used to talking and they're going to be all about each other's business. You are going to have to focus in on the privacy aspect. But real quick, we do have a question. And this is a little bit outside of our expertise, but I want to kind of address it. It says, what about insurance company policies? If I live in a state where I'm able to get the care I need, but the company's insurance is in a state where it's not, will insurance still be valid?
So
that's a good question.
Really good question. And so one of the things that we are trying to provide guidance on here and in the previous conversation about this is it really depends. You know, some insurance companies will say, and that's why your leadership team, that's why you should speak to your leadership team. You don't have to go to them and say, or HR and say, hey, like I'm concerned about this.
Right.
Because of this, these are my feelings and my opinions. You can just ask a general question, just like you posed it here. I don't know what your stance is on Roe v. Wade reversal, but I do know that you have a very legitimate question.
Yes.
And so, yes. And so posing the question saying, you know, what about insurance company policies and bringing that up, your leadership team, your HR department, whoever the liaison is, you know, for your insurance company should be able to ask those questions. You also, a lot of insurance companies will allow for you to give them a call and say, hey,
yes, that's what I was going to say. Call them direct. That's even better.
You know,
right now,
to get the care, and how is that going to be covered? Go ahead.
Yes. No, I was going to say for now, I would stick to the insurance companies because right now HR probably doesn't know. And you don't want that information passed along. You don't want the game of telephone for something this important. So for right now, until everybody's kind of caught up to speed, I would say call your insurance company directly because she is absolutely right. It's going to just depend on the coverage, how your policy is worded. And I will tell you, sometimes the same company will have policies where it would be fine and they'll pay it and policies where they won't. It just depends on what coverage was paid for. So you need to go over your policy yourself and then you need to call your insurance company with that question. But that is an excellent question. So back to privacy because insurance was kind of a perfect segue into that anyway. Let's talk about the privacy here. So, you know, a fear that I think a lot of people are having is, okay, so you're offering this benefit. Well, who all do I have to tell what I'm doing, all of this? And what I'm encouraging for my consultation, and I'm very curious to hear your thoughts, is even when you go to activate, let's say the company has a benefit that will support you. You don't need to tell them why. You just need to go say, I need to have this, I need to activate this benefit. And frankly, that you could be the caregiver. You could be, and that's why I said to word it that way, so that it's not so invasive. Maybe you're the caregiver to the person. Maybe you're the person having it. Maybe you're the person that, you know, whatever. But maybe you have something else entirely if you word it the way I initially said, where it's for any surgery that requires travel. So I think that it's important that companies make a stance that we don't need to know details. And that the one person who's your contact handles everything, even with the manager and arranging time off. They should not be having to bounce around from place to place to place. It should be one person handling everything. And when it comes to coding everything, there does not need to be a special code for reimbursement for this. It should be handled like any other reimbursement. So you should take it away on that one.
All good points. And so, first things first, just like we try to ensure the privacy for all other situations, we should absolutely do the same. In writing the policy, I thought about this a couple of days ago because I saw a comment where somebody was specifying the language that they were going to use in the policy. And I was like, no, don't do that, because it was very specific to the cause, right? How much time you needed off and all of that. So, anybody who is looking at that document, because medical files should be kept separate from personnel files. But
yes, oh my God, yes.
Yeah, a lot of people don't know that and don't do that. So if you currently have your medical files inside your personnel files, I said, no, take care of it today. Or soon. But some people
call Tisha, she'll help you.
Yes, I will definitely help you. So if you are someone in that situation, and let's just say, for instance, you're going to talk to one person, that person is no longer there, right? They put your file, pass your file off to someone else, right? There's potential, especially in small companies, there's potential for people to get access to that information who shouldn't have it. So it shouldn't be coded in a way that it identifies what that person was coming to you for. So I agree 100% with Catherine on that. I also think that it's really important, like she said, about coding. Don't code it differently, because when you code it differently, anybody who has access to those payroll records and knows what that code is, guess what? Like, they can tell what it's being used for.
And that's so inappropriate.
It's so inappropriate.
A company of any size, by the way, this applies to a company of any size.
Absolutely.
Don't do it.
Right.
I've had people ask, should I require like a doctor's note to prove that that's what they did? So here's what I said. So first of all, God, no. Second of all, I think the closest you could ever come, and I wouldn't ever recommend this, the closest you could ever come is something that has everything redacted except for like the name of the facility. Like if you're providing reimbursement for the procedure, basically, is the only way that you could ever justify this. And it would only show the facility and your name, and that's it. Everything else would be redacted. So that's the most that you could ever prove. And even that's only if you are offering reimbursement for the procedure itself.
I agree 100%. Again, I mean, nobody wants to walk up and say, hey, I'm going to have an abortion. Can I get that benefit that you like?
Yeah. Lord, no.
One person. I mean, it shouldn't even be identified if it's you or if it's a daughter or if it's your spouse or whomever. Just, I need this benefit, and again, written into those policies, who a caregiver, written into those policies, who can benefit from this, who can use this benefit, is going to help you a whole lot, because that minimizes the amount of specificity that employee has to provide. I do see a question about the outsourcing too.
Yes. And I want to put this up here. So this is a long one. So but we are going to dive into it because I like this. It says, would this be something to consider possibly sourcing out? First of all, yes, absolutely consider outsourcing if your in-house person is not comfortable processing these claims. Absolutely. Also, additional question, going forward as a company, if your policy does include covering this type of coverage or policy, would you be able to ask in an interview if they would need an accommodation performing these actions? So first of all, please don't do that. Never ask someone if they need an accommodation. And I see where you're coming from. So I don't want to scold you. I do see where you're coming from. It's kind of like the vaccine question. A lot of people were like, oh, can we ask about the vaccine? That type of thing. So I see where you're coming from. But the reason I had such a drastic reaction is that you will get sued. So please don't do that. I cannot stress that enough. Never ask someone if they need an accommodation. What you can do is make sure that they are aware of your policy. Don't ask a question around it. Just so that we have this accommodation policy, leave it there. They will bring up if they want to let you know immediately about an accommodation, so on and so forth. Any thoughts on that, Tisha, that you want to throw in there?
Excuse me. And I don't know if it's Solange. I'm sorry. I hope not to butcher your name. My name is Antisha. Part of the reason why I go by Tisha is because people butcher my name. But so I apologize if I did mispronounce your name. But I think where she's coming from is a lot of in interviews, people will ask the question, a blanket question, do you need an accommodation to perform these tasks, or do you need an accommodation for this interview?
Right.
And part of the reason for that is making sure that the company gives that person or provides that person with the accommodation. Not saying, hey, since you're saying you need this accommodation, we're not going to hire you or move you forward in the interview process.
But that's the perception that can be created.
Absolutely. You are absolutely right. So we agree on so many things.
We got it. We know what we're doing.
but it's the perception. And so again, I talk a lot about wording, how you word it, how you word things, and the explanation that you are providing. It should not be to single a person out. If you're asking the question, and I'm sure you wouldn't do this, but if you're asking the question because you want to be able to determine whether or not the person is going to perform these duties because they feel one way or the other, then that's absolutely a no, and you will get sued for that. And so it's a really, really good question, but I just wanted to clarify when Catherine was saying like not to ask the accommodation question, that is what we mean by that.
Yes. Yeah. Don't ask it. Be very careful how you ask it. And when it comes to the job description, I want to throw this out too. So you can list that this is part of the duties. And then I would also specify, somewhere in the job description, doesn't have to be right next to that, but you also specify, we support accommodations and that type of thing. I would make sure that that's in there somewhere just to kind of, make sure they understand. Because I did, the last kind of polarizing topic was the vaccine one, and people got so upset about that. It became a very hot topic for candidates, a very, very big hot button. And so, it is going to be kind of similar to that, except even more extreme, because both sides have a good, both sides have a very strong hold on their feelings about it. So just get ready. And good morning to Jason too. So we're kind of at the end of our time, but I feel like we have so much more that we could unpack. But so tell me, the final words. What are the final thoughts that you want to impart on these small businesses that are having to handle this very unusual crisis, so to speak?
Final thoughts. It's a challenge. It's definitely a challenge. It's things that probably a lot of us didn't think we would be having to even have a conversation about today, but we do. Again, in addition to all of the things that we've already mentioned, if you don't know if you're unsure, if you are a small department of one and you need some guidance, feel free to reach out. Yes. I have access to ELAs. ELAs are employment law attorneys, so I do have access. Also, a lot of the information I do provide is free information because I'm so helpful. Yes. But however, this is my business.
She goes, I'm so helpful.
Yes, I try to be really, really helpful. So if it's something that you need. I'm still learning. I'm still figuring things out. I'm still asking questions, and I'm still doing the research myself for the small businesses that I support and my small businesses as well. So I don't have all the answers, and what I may provide to you may not necessarily work for you, but we have to start somewhere. So hopefully these tips that we've provided will help you do that.
And it is different per state in some cases. So we can help connect you to people in other states that in your state that can help you, or in the state of your employee. And remember that where they are matters, not just where you are. And Soul Angel, which by the way, she did tell us how to pronounce her name. She is an HR student. Bring this up in your classes too, please. Ask the teacher, get these questions answered. This is something that they should be teaching you how to do as well. I want to thank you so very much for joining us. For anybody interested in women's constitutional rights, because we don't have constitutional equality after 250 years, go ahead and go to prioritizeequality.com. There are lots of resources there for that. If you want a policy, a pre-written policy for your small business, contact me. My website, I'm going to put it up here so that you can go to it. It's titanmanagementusa.com. I do have the pre-written. Tisha here would be wonderful to consult with you about some of your policies, how you're handling that. That's very much up her alley. We both have associations with different employment law attorneys, so reach out to either of us for support, and contact both of us on LinkedIn. Feel free to connect with us, reach out, ask all of your questions, give your opinions, whatever you have to say. And with that, we wish you all a happy Friday. Take care.